Hello everyone and welcome to the, I think, solar eclipse in Gemini, new moon, guided intention setting. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're running a little bit behind schedule and we're not broadcasting on Facebook. That's part of the reason why. So I apologize for that. Those of you who normally catch live on Facebook, stream's not connecting to Facebook this evening and I'm not sure what the issue is. So just, excuse me, while I knock the microphone, live to YouTube tonight. So thank you everyone for joining me. I'm gonna get the comments pulled up so I can have a look at your comments while we're live and get my notes in front of me. Thank you everyone for joining me. I'm really kind of excited to be here. I'm Gemini rising, so it's kind of fun for me. New moon solar eclipse in Gemini. Okay, so let me know if you're joining me live, please, if you can hear me and see me okay. Looks like we have a live stream to YouTube just fine, but no broadcast to Facebook, so that's fine. It'll go to Facebook later after the fact. Thank you everyone for joining me. I'm really, really excited. So I'm Phaedra. I'm the astrologer and artist of Mystick, Physick, Astrology, for those of you who are new to the broadcast. My aim really with these broadcasts is to kind of offer you guidance on how you can consciously use the energy of the transiting planets, really, to kind of work with them intentionally rather than just react to what's happening astrologically. So tonight, this is very fun. This is an eclipse. This is powerful new moon magic in a way. You could call it magic. It's not really magic, but it sure seems like magic. So if you need to look up your sidereal sign placements, you can do that at my website at mystickphysick.com/sidereal tools. I will be adding a link to the video description after the video is over. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to add it before we went live. But hopefully you have your chart with you. Tonight, we're going to be looking at how we can get into kind of storytelling and how we can use curiosity to explore new ways of telling stories in our lives and doing so in a way that's for our benefit. That's really the whole idea. We're going to explore the concept, of exchange, of dialogue. And then as we get into the actual intention setting, we are going to be playing around with this idea of writing our own fairy tale ending for the story that we're currently living in our life. And we're going to explore how we can use these ideas to bring fresh new experiences into our lives. And first, what I want to do, though, is talk a little bit about this particular solar eclipse and how we might experience that. I want to talk about the astrology specifically of it. And then in the second part of the video, we're going to get into which house this particular solar eclipse is falling into for each of you according to your sidereal rising sign. And that way, if you want to use the eclipse aligned with your natal blueprint, you can. However, because this is an eclipse, I really encourage you take this where you feel led. Eclipses are powerful opportunities, both new moons and full moons. And when we do the intention setting and the releasing practice around eclipses, I really strongly encourage you. You know best what this energy is for. We're all guided in some ways in our lives, and I encourage you to take it in the direction that you know you need to take it for yourself. But in part 3 is where we're going to really dive in. That's where we're going to get into the Gemini archetype. We're going to explore Gemini themes in more depth, and then we're going to use some prompts to kind of inspire this intention setting, this storytelling practice tonight. So thank you for joining me. Welcome. Let's see where we're at with, looks like we have some decent stream health tonight. That's good. And my notes, here we go. Let's kind of dive in. I'm ready to do this. So let's first maybe just recap a little bit about eclipses and how we experience them, what they do. I don't want to dive into this too much because hopefully you've all have watched my video, 3 Important Eclipse Essentials You Need to Know. Hopefully you've already watched the video about the June and July 2020 mid-year eclipse season, which we're currently about halfway through right now, where I get into the larger picture of the summer eclipse season and how it's transitioning us out of one pair of eclipse families into a new pair of eclipse families. But in part 3, that's when we're going to dive into the archetype and get into the nitty gritty. Up front, I want to talk a little more generally. So we know the eclipses expose secrets. They expose hidden things, hidden information. They can bring new beginnings. They can signify endings. Usually these types of beginnings and endings are fairly permanent for us. Right now we're moving through eclipse season when it's also retrograde season. And so that permanence may not hold as strong as it might during most eclipse seasons. Or it may be that we don't really see the permanent and final shape of things until after retrograde season is kind of wound down a bit. So there's 2 ways that we could kind of feel this play out, with retrograde season happening concurrently with eclipse season. But the types of endings that eclipses bring, the types of beginnings that eclipses bring, this can be when people leave our lives for good or come into our lives. Maybe we meet new people who have just a dramatic way of altering our life course in some way, or our life path. But typically the change that is brought about by an eclipse is permanent change. And oftentimes it's change that is kind of forcing us to move on from something that we've been holding on to for longer than is really necessary, longer than is really for our own good. Eclipses tend to force change where life has gotten stagnant. So you don't get a free pass to drag your feet forever in that regard, right? Excuse me. So these are really powerful lunations, a lot stronger, excuse me, than a typical new or full moon. And they bring upheaval. They bring change, where we've kind of settled in and gotten a little stale. And in Gemini, eclipses can be a little bit erratic. This can maybe give the eclipse a little bit of a bipolar kind of flavor in that sense, because, excuse me, I don't have water with me tonight. Normally I do. But Gemini can be kind of this unsettled type of energy, right? It's a mutable sign. It can be shifting. It can be kind of back and forth, and it describes our thinking. It describes our mental activity. It describes our ability to analyze and process information and generate new ideas and resolve ideas. And so in Gemini, eclipses can be kind of erratic. They can affect our thinking. They affect the mind, and they particularly affect people who write for a living in some way. They affect writing. They can affect communications and communications equipment. We actually recently had an outage. You probably were affected. I've used one of the major cellular carriers. I want to say it was just earlier this past week there was an outage. So these are the types of things that an eclipse in Gemini can kind of trigger. They can be intensely insightful eclipses. They can affect travel and transportation as well. Let's not forget that. What I want to call out is at an eclipse in Gemini, you want to really avoid taking people at their word. You want to disregard any promises that have been made to you in the days and weeks around this particular new moon. And I would encourage you to do that right now anyway, just because we have Mercury just recently stationed retrograde just a couple days ago on the 18th, right? And anytime that's the case, you want to avoid taking people at their word and kind of slow down and hold off. Don't hold people to statements too I don't know what the word is I'm reaching for here, too inflexibly, right? We want to be flexible when it's a new moon in Gemini, or an eclipse in Gemini especially. I would also encourage you to keep your schedule free, keep it kind of open and clear during the coming weeks. That way you can better deal with or react to unexpected changes that might come up related to eclipse activities, eclipse events, especially if you're traveling. You want to keep room in your itinerary for the potential for delays, for reschedules, for detours if you're traveling. But just in general, Mercury retrograde can be a period where we experience increase in cancellations of appointments or engagements that maybe we already had. And so just know that these sorts of things can be taking place, and try not to hold too tightly to your existing schedules, your existing itineraries or agendas. Just know that you may need to be flexible in your attitude just to accommodate those types of changes. And I would also encourage you, hold off making important decisions if you can. Wait until after the eclipses have run their course. You want to leave plenty of room for the situation, whatever it is that you're currently in, to change, and for whatever this eclipse information is to come to light before you commit to a course of action or to a decision. And as always, because it's eclipse time, you really want to avoid issuing ultimatums. Ultimatums can really backfire quite badly during eclipse time. So it's not a time to be issuing ultimatums. Now, just kind of general Mercury retrograde advice. This is a time to really be double and triple checking forms, applications, communications, memos, emails, anything like that that you need to send. Look for typos. You want to be text messages. That's I can tell when Mercury retrograde is coming, because the autocorrect on my phone, it's like it goes nuts. Double check for autocorrect mistakes, double check for typos. These types of errors, what they can do during Mercury retrograde is lead to otherwise preventable disruptions that you'd rather not have to deal with. So slow down, take your time, double check all of those types of things. And just be aware that delays and obstacles and roadblocks and things like that can arise out of the blue due to communication breakdowns, due to hiccups in technology. But the good news is that a little bit of ingenuity on our part and a little bit of out-of-the-box thinking can help resolve those issues without too much hassle. So just take care. I would say that it is possible to get derailed by conflict at this eclipse. So do be careful about that. Patience might be a little harder to come by. We've got Mars squaring the lights, squaring the nodes. And that can make things really kind of tense. However, constructive conflict can be beneficial. And so that's where I'd want you to don't throw the conflict baby out with the bathwater, because conflict can be healthy if it's approached correctly, and it can bring us to resolution, especially during a Mercury retrograde period. You could take advantage of constructive conflict to reach a reconciliation with someone that you need to reconcile with. So keep that in mind. We also still have Venus retrograde for a little bit longer. So if that reconciliation needs to take place within the confines of a romantic relationship or within the confines of a business relationship, there's potential for that right now too. So just be aware there's some useful ways that you can tap into the current eclipse and retrograde energy to leverage it to your advantage, even though this might not be the ideal new moon for starting a new venture. Okay. So what I want you to be thinking about tonight, really this eclipse is around the idea of what's the story that you're telling. Get clear about what kind of story you want to be telling versus what's the story you've been telling. And you can leverage Mercury retrograde to go back and tell a new story. Okay, so this particular eclipse is our new moon in Gemini at 5 degrees 19 minutes. It's going to be exact in the wee hours of the morning, 2:39 a.m. Eastern time. So being in Gemini, this is going to particularly affect folks with Gemini sun or rising, of course, but anyone with a personal planet or point at 5 or 6 degrees of an air or fire sign. So Gemini, Libra, Aquarius, Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius. Those are going to be the signs that you're going to want to look at in your sidereal natal chart. Okay, so have a look at those. If you have a personal planet or point, we'll feel the effects of the eclipse through Gemini-ruled themes and Gemini-ruled areas of life. So this could be sudden changes to travel plans, unexpected news, visits from siblings, extended family. Mercury rules this new moon, right? And Mercury's retrograde in his home sign of Gemini. We have a wide sextile to Uranus at this new moon, and we have Mercury in sextile to the transiting ascendant which is conjunct the transiting part of fortune. And so the right action has the potential to move you forward at this new moon, even though everything is retrograde. We also, with this new moon, we have Mars sextile Jupiter. We have Jupiter conjunct Pluto in Sagittarius. He's backtracking into Sagittarius tomorrow, kind of as we speak, essentially. And so surprises, unexpected news could come up right now. This is a generally kind of an easy new moon, though. It's kind of an easy eclipse, but the risk there is that it's also easy to waste the energy. So you want to take action, but you want to kind of be tentative and hold off until you've gotten your eclipse news delivered. And you want to make sure that that action is about restarting something that you've already begun, that you just haven't brought to fruition the first time around. So the right action, like we're saying, can move you further down the path of growth and learning your life lesson right now. And like I said, that could include conflict. So go back to something you started but didn't finish. Go back and reconcile with someone. Restart something that's important to you. If you have Gemini rising or Gemini sun, you could take this as an opportunity to reinvent yourself. You can also use it to restore communication with someone in your life, or you could take a trip to somewhere that you've been before that you particularly enjoyed. You can always go back and visit during a Mercury retrograde cycle. It's always a good type of action to take. This is a time when you could renegotiate a prior agreement with someone, or if you need to break a promise that you've made, you could break a promise. Do it kindly, do it gently. But you could use the energy that we have going right now to undo a contract or wind down a contract so that you can make a fresh new approach in the Gemini area of your life. This is your chance to tell a whole new story going forward. So be thinking about, what does that fairy tale ending look like for you? Be thinking about, what is the ideal ending that I want? And try to align it with the energy of this eclipse, which is really quite easy energy. This doesn't need to be a difficult outcome. It doesn't need to be too much of a battle to get what you want necessarily. With Mercury in Gemini, so Mercury first entered Gemini at our last eclipse, at the June 5th full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio. He's going to be in Gemini until August 2nd. So this is a longer transit for Gemini in a sign. Now, August 2nd is also the same day that Venus is going to leave Taurus for Gemini. So we've got a couple of planets kind of shifting signs during that time frame. So with Mercury in Gemini, this gives us, for such an extended stay, this gives us an opportunity to clear the air, okay? To really re-engage in a useful and helpful dialogue in some way. Okay. Now, if you haven't, I would encourage you read up on the Mercury Retrograde Survival Guide at my website. I'll include a link to that in the video description after I hop off. Just because it's going to give you some guidance on things you don't want to do during Mercury Retrograde, but ways you can use Mercury Retrograde. And in that guide, I'm going to take you through identifying which house Mercury's retrograde is falling into for you according to your sidereal natal report, or your sidereal chart, so that you can then tailor a plan for how you want to use Mercury's retrograde based on where it falls in your chart. I would go ahead and encourage you to do that after you've done your intention setting practice, because Mercury's retrograde is just starting. It's going to carry through to June 12th, so you have several more weeks that you can leverage this energy to kind of go through and clean house in some way in your life. That's the perfect way to be using Mercury retrograde. And so the survival guide is going to walk you through exactly how to kind of put together a plan for that. But right now, be thinking of ways that you can clear the air. Be looking at ways where you can reconcile misunderstandings or miscommunications in your life. Like I said, watch for this new information to come to you and adjust your understanding of the situation based on this new information. Adjust your understanding and then use this time to make your course correction for how you want to move forward. So this is a time for redoing things. It's time for reviewing and re-examining. It's a time for checking for accuracy and effectiveness, the ways that you've been doing things, at the ways that you've been communicating with people. It's a time to take a closer look at the details and the finer points. And it's a time to tweak as necessary, right? So rework and revise things that you've already had in motion rather than starting anything brand new. But rework and revise them in ways that will help move them towards what you ultimately want them to be, okay? So this is a really opportune time for taking stock of what is the story I've been telling about this thing, this situation or this scenario or this circumstance, this event in my life. What story can I tell that would move me closer to where I want to be with this? Okay. So that really kind of wraps it for talking about the astrology of this particular eclipse in particular. I think I said particular twice right there. And what I want to do right now is kind of dive into which house and what the themes of each of the houses are for each of you according to what your sidereal rising sign is. So I'm going to blast through that really quickly. If you're familiar with the house system, you can use this chance to kind of take a break, come back here in a few minutes. And then in the third part, we're going to get into Gemini. We're going to get into the archetype. We're going to get into all the good stuff. So for Aries rising, of course, because this falls with the natural zodiac, this is your third house new moon. So that has to do with communication. It has to do with writing and teaching and learning and travel. All of the good things that we've been talking about. Has to do with siblings and neighbors and extended family. So things like aunts and uncles and cousins. And then the third house also relates to your immediate environment as well. Okay, so you could see permanent changes to your immediate environment. Something could be about to be different related to your own neighborhood, right? For Taurus, this is going to be a second house new moon. So that'll be wealth and possessions. That's movable assets, money we earn, real estate. Also has to do with self-worth, our values, and priorities. So this is powerful magic for a second house new moon. This would be a really good time if you have Taurus rising to be making another effort towards boosting your income in some way. So if you already started kind of a side hustle or something like that, and it just really hasn't gotten off the ground, give it another effort with this new moon, and you could see this really start to pay off in about 6 months, in about a year. Certainly by the end of the coming Scorpio-Taurus eclipse cycle, you could start to see that pay off. Okay. For Gemini, it's first house, so this is like a birthday new moon if you have Gemini rising. This is personality and identity. It has to do with self-expression, the physical body, your appearance, your behavior and your mannerisms, the role that you play in the world. So something about the role that you play or the way that you interact with the world around you is likely going to be making a permanent change in direction. For those of you who have Gemini rising, this is a way that you could experience this new moon solar eclipse. For Cancer rising, though, this is going to be a 12th house new moon. So that has to do with privacy, has to do with seclusion, has to do with withdrawing from the world, right? The activities that we do behind closed doors, things that we do on our own. This also has to do with highly personal or private projects. And rest and retreat, escape, recuperation, withdrawal from the world for our own time to regenerate and restore our energy. Okay. For Leo, 11th house, so friends, organizations, hopes and dreams. For Virgo, this is going to be a 10th house new moon. So career, awards, recognition, status and reputation, your public life, right? Your professional life is the 10th house. So really, if you have had career goals that you've been working on, Virgo, see about giving them a reboot, because this could be a really powerful opportunity to help leverage eclipse energy to move you forward in your career as the coming months play out and we embark on a new eclipse season as well. Okay. For our new eclipse cycle, I should say, the family of signs that is happening in is what we're talking about. For Libra, this is a 9th house new moon. So that has to do with higher education. Potentially it has to do with long distance travel, long distance communication, international affairs, basically. So foreign travel or foreign people that you encounter in your life. 9th house also has to do with religion, philosophy, and law as well. For Scorpio rising, this is going to be an 8th house new moon. That has to do with other people's resources that are at your disposal. So resources that come to you through the partner potentially, but it can also relate to investment earnings. It can relate to insurance, taxes, inheritance monies, bonus or commission income is also the 8th house. And then the 8th house relates to other non-financial themes, things like the occult, death, rebirth, transformation, psychology, analysis, investigation, those sorts of deep digging kinds of topics. And for Sagittarius, this will be a 7th house new moon for you. So 7th house is related to business and partnership, right? Marriage partnerships, the relationships that we have with other people in general. And also what we tend to reject about ourselves and project onto other people, especially when we're talking about the descendant. We can really get into some shadow work when we're talking about 7th house. And then don't forget, 7th house also describes our relationships with open enemies and rivals. Okay. For Capricorn rising, this is a 6th house new moon for you. So it has to do with work, has to do with health and diet, has to do with your daily routines, your habits, your schedules. Pets and employees also fall into the 6th house as well. And then for Aquarius, this is going to be a 5th house new moon for you. So that's creativity, that's children, that's romance and true love. Has to do with pleasurable activities, things that we do for fun, things that we enjoy. So hobbies, of course, sports, risk-taking, gambling, all those sorts of things are 5th house activities if you have Aquarius rising. And then for Pisces rising, finally, this will be a 4th house new moon for you. So that has to do with home and family. It has to do with real estate. It has to do with your parents potentially. Could be either one or both of the parents. Okay, but that has to do with your residence, your living situation. Okay. If anyone has questions about any of the houses or themes or any of the rising signs, let me know in the comments below. And then what we'll do is we will move on to our talk about the Gemini themes and the Gemini archetype specifically. We'll talk also about some prompts and some things that you can use to kind of just spur your imagination for how you want to use this new moon solar eclipse for setting intentions for the house that Gemini falls in your sidereal natal chart. And I also want to encourage you, because this is a solar eclipse, and because solar eclipses are so much more powerful than a typical new moon, I would encourage you to do this practice again a second time afterwards, but do it again for your sun sign. And that way you're tapping into the eclipse energy twice and leveraging it twice, once for your rising sign, once for your sun sign, and taking advantage of it, getting double your money. Not that hopefully you spent, money on an eclipse, right? We're just being funny. But Gemini, let's talk about Gemini. So Gemini is the sign of the twins, right? This has to do with Castor and Pollux, Cain and Abel. Sometimes, in some ways, it's considered to symbolize Adam and Eve. So the male-female polarity, not just the twins in that sense. So the male-female integrated polarity, the balance, right? The anima and animus. So Gemini is also the writer and communicator. This is about dialogue. This is about words and the exchange of ideas and information. It's about storytelling, right? Mercury rules Gemini. Mercury is the messenger of the gods, right? Mercury exchanges information and ideas between the us and the other parts of our lives. And so one of the ways that that can express, especially when we're talking about Mercury, is this archetype of the trickster, right? And that's one of the signatures of Mercury and of Gemini that we're going to explore tonight. The storyteller, the messenger of the gods, the wanderer. This is also an archetype of Mercury. The student and the teacher, that dual role of exchange, because you can't have one without the other, right? Without a student, there's no teacher. Without a teacher, there's no student. The trickster is an expression of this, and this is one where you really literally have to be careful about your words, and that's kind of why I want to spend some time exploring this archetype tonight, because we're working with this idea of storytelling and being careful with your words. So we can equate this to the idea of the genie that grants wishes according to what you said and not what you meant, right? Where you're just taking a little too literally, or more literally than you intended, and not actually getting what you want because of it. And that is where, in terms of manifesting, in terms of creating the reality we want to experience, I think sometimes that's where we tend to trip ourselves up, because we get caught up in the very human activities of explaining and complaining. We have to be telling a story about why things are the way they are, why we're experiencing the situation that we're experiencing. And the problem is sometimes we get too wrapped up in telling that story. And sometimes getting caught up in explaining why we're having the experience we're having is derailing our forward progress. And sometimes getting too wrapped up in the complaining about why things are the way we are derails our forward progress, just because of the way that reality works, the way that its nature is that of a tuning fork to harmonize with whatever frequency you're vibrating at. And if you're vibrating at the frequency of complaining about things, the universe will hand you more to complain about, right? That's just the way it works. It's very simple physics. And so what I want to encourage us to do tonight is discover the power of living in the question, which is something that I learned from a really cool website. I think it's called The Conscious CEO. The power of living in the question and being open-ended about outcomes, and ways that we can turn our mental storytelling on its head so that we can manifest what we really actually want to manifest in life. And this is where we can end up, sometimes you may have felt this yourself, feeling compelled to always explain why things aren't happening the way that you want them to, or why you can't have what you want, right? I'm such a dummy. I am never going to get this right. It has to do with even your self-talk in that way. Are you constantly looking for the why your situation is the way that it is? And is that actually serving you? These are things to be considering, right? So for instance, if you regularly complain about your health, right? About aches and pains in your body, about your eyesight, about your memory, about your partner, about your family, about your financial situation, have you ever stopped to wonder why you experience no improvement around those things, regardless of how much you try? Well, it's because your words and your thoughts are undermining your desires and your efforts. That's why. Okay? So instead, what you want to be doing is taking the time to appreciate and tell the story about what it is you like instead of what you don't like. Because in any given situation or circumstance, there is good and bad to be found in it. And if you're focusing solely on the bad, that's what you give your attention to is what grows, right? You get what you give your attention to. And so if you're focusing your attention solely on the bad, you're just going to get more like that. And if you can take a step back and distance yourself, maybe get a little perspective and start looking for the things that there are to appreciate in a circumstance or a situation, or in something that you've been experiencing, and focus more about why you like those things that are worth appreciating, you can expand the stuff that's worth appreciating, right? So tell the story of what you do like instead of constantly beating the drum of what you don't like, okay? Explaining why we are where we are is a really convenient way of shifting responsibility for the situation that we're in. It's a method of externalizing blame, which externalizes responsibility and externalizes, even much more than that, our power to change our circumstances. Explaining, quite simply, is giving away your power. Okay? And so what I want to encourage you to do is, regardless of the cause, regardless of our own blamelessness, recognize that no one else is going to be accepting responsibility either, right? Guaranteed. No one is going to accept responsibility. Which means the only way to extract ourselves from any kind of unwelcome predicament or uncomfortable situation in life is to take action our own selves. And in doing so, we accept responsibility for our own outcome, right? Because is a very powerful word. Very powerful. The good news is that we can leverage the power of that word and empower ourselves with it just as easily as we can give away our own power, right? You may have heard, and I've used this analogy in the past, in past broadcasts, you may have heard the story of, this was a social experiment that was done, where they had folks line up to use a copy machine, and someone come and ask if they could cut ahead in line after folks had been waiting. And in this social experiment, they did it twice. In one situation, they just had a person ask if they could cut ahead. And in another situation, they had the same person ask if they could cut ahead because. And they would give a reason. Oh, because I only have one copy to make, because I'm in a hurry, because I've been waiting. But they gave a because. And in this experiment around human social behavior, what they found is that when a person gave the reason why they needed to be allowed to cut ahead in line, the folks who had been waiting were far more likely to allow them to do that, and to do it graciously, right? Because is a powerful word. And so what I want you to do tonight, as we get into the intention setting part, is I want you to really think long and hard about your because. What is your because? Why do you want the outcome that you want? We're going to get into what is your fairy tale outcome, and also why. Why do you want that? And your reasons are your reasons, and they are perfectly fine and perfectly legitimate. But the purpose of tonight's exercise is just to identify exactly what they are, because they can add power to your ability to manifest what it is that you want. So if, excuse me, if up until now you've been telling a story of blamelessness, or if you've invested yourself in explanations as to why you are where you are, or why things can't be any different, or why you need to be on the path that you're on, why you're stuck, whatever it is, this new moon, this solar eclipse in Gemini, is challenging you to tell another story. And it's challenging you to tell a story that empowers you. Okay? It's challenging you to tell a story where you're not the victim any longer, you're the hero. Okay? We want to get you out of blamelessness, because blamelessness only makes you the victim. Okay? So if you've been making excuses for not having what you want, right? We do that. I can't afford that. In other words, describing the experience that you currently have instead of the experience that you actually want, right? How can you turn that into a question and open yourself to infinite possibilities? How can I afford that? I really want that. How could I afford that? That would be so cool. So ask these questions, and ask them from a place of genuine childlike wonder, right? Remember, Gemini is the natural ruler of the third house. It describes our childhood experience, right? It's a sign of curiosity. So tap into that natural childlike curiosity, genuine childlike wonder, and live in the question, right? So if you've been on the internet very long, you've probably seen that meme that floats around every once in a while about that's why it's called spelling. to be careful of what you say because words have power. That's why it's called spelling, casting spells, right? What you manifest always matches the vibrational frequency of the words that you think and the words that you speak, right? In the Bible, creation is literally referred to as the Logos, or the Word of God. Words have creative power. And Gemini is about what are the words that you're using. So let's be really careful about this because this is really powerful, powerful magic. Words literally have the power of creation. I am that I am, right? Now, other Gemini themes that we can explore are, quite specifically, curiosity. We talked about that one a little bit. We talked about ideas. Learning and teaching is another Gemini concept, the exchange of understanding, right? Dialogue, back and forth in communication. This concept of back and forth. There's a very Gemini concept. Trade, dialogue, teaching and learning. These are all concepts of back and forth exchange, right? So in what way can you exchange with your reality? Okay. So tonight's intentions, I want you to be thinking about how can you tell a different story about your life? I want you to be thinking about how you can tell a story that empowers you. I want you to be thinking about what is the fairy tale ending that I want for this story or for this part of my life. What is my ideal fairy tale ending? If I could have anything that I wanted, what would it be? And then as you're done working through what that is, I want you to spend some time thinking about why, and even write it down. Why do I want this? What is my because? Right? So how can you tell a different story? And how can you choose to tell a new story that actually empowers you in your life, that doesn't take away your power or give away your power? What is the new question that you're going to be asking? How will you turn around your tendency to describe and define, which limits, right? That limits your experience, in order to open yourself up to infinite possibilities? What's your because? And does that because empower you, or does it disempower you? And if it disempowers you, how can you reframe it in a way that's empowering? Okay. So this is a new moon. This is a solar eclipse for practicing telling a new story. So really what I would encourage you to do is, as you move into the coming weeks after this new moon, is make it a point to practice telling your new story anytime you catch yourself explaining or complaining or criticizing, whether you're criticizing yourself or criticizing others. And then get into ways that you can invite more curiosity into your life. How can being more curious help you to invite in possibilities and opportunities? How can it help open you up to new ways of doing things, new information, new ideas, new exchanges with new people? How can you invite new in through curiosity? Okay. Now, also be open to what ways you can invite in exchange into your experience, the exchange of ideas, the exchange of knowledge, of goods or services, or of information. And how can you use this kind of exchange to benefit you in your Gemini house? Okay. And then what intention can you set for that? What's your ideal outcome? What's your fairy tale ending? Okay. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that this ending look at it from the perspective of if you could have any ending to the story that you want, the world is your oyster. This is all possibilities, all potentials are on the table. And there's no judgment about the why. You're in charge of your because, and no one else's thoughts or opinions or judgments about your because matter. Your feelings, your own judgments about your because are the only ones that matter, right? So how would you tell the story? What ending would you want? So take some time to visualize this ideal outcome. And I want you to really get into imagining the details. Gemini is about the details, right? So be getting into what are the sights, what are the sounds, what are the smells, what way would this outcome make you feel to have it? How would it feel in the experiencing of it, right? And as you're tapping into all of those details, try to get into the emotional space of it too. Get into a space of gratitude, a space of appreciation for it as you're visualizing it, okay? As you're drawing it out on your paper. And I would encourage you to do that. So after you write out your intention setting, especially because this is an eclipse, this is powerful, we're going to have you write out your intention. But then I would take some time here tonight while you're doing this to do the visualizing and to draw it out on your piece of paper. And it can be chicken scratch, it can be stick figures, it doesn't have to be fancy, but draw it out because you can bring it into your manifestation that much quicker if you do. Okay? And so I want you to do that tonight while we're doing the practice. And then also, I really recommend creating an affirmation around your intention, an affirmation, and plan your first step. What's your first action item that you're going to do? Typically, we would have you take your first step towards whatever it is you're wanting to begin during a new moon in the days just after, when you can see the first light of the new moon out in the night sky. That's the right time, as long as the astrology is favorable, to be making your initiation, right? So tonight, plan what that first step is going to be so that you come away from tonight's practice with an idea already in mind of what is your next step, what you're going to do, and when you're going to be doing it. Okay? But like I said, we're going back to a story that we've been telling. We're going back to a situation or a circumstance or something that's already in play, where we're not happy with the direction it's going, or maybe we want to refine or tweak the direction that it's going. And we're going to look at how we can adjust and make changes to that tonight so that we can set a new course going forward rather than actually starting something brand new tonight in the middle of retrograde season and eclipse season. Okay? So everyone grab your pen and paper. I'm going to recap these prompts for anyone who might be joining the live broadcast a little bit late. And then we'll dive in and we'll do our intention setting. I'm really excited about this one. Really excited. All right. So how can you tell a different story? And how can choosing to tell a new story empower you in your life? What is your new question? And how will you turn around your tendency to describe and define and therefore limit your experience, and instead open yourself up to infinite possibilities? Right? Tonight we're going to get into our because. So, how can you invite curiosity into your life? In what ways can you invite exchange into your experience? The exchange of ideas, knowledge, goods, services, or information. And how could it benefit you? And then, what is your ideal outcome or fairy tale ending? Describe it. What's your happily ever after? That's what we want to know. If you could have any ending to the story that you want, what would it be? How will you tell the story? How will it end? Okay, so take some time with that. I'm going to dive in on mine, but before I do, I'm going to read you out of the Moon Gazing Journal that I always do my intention setting in. I haven't screened this, so we'll discover what this says together. Sometimes this is kind of fun, right? According to the Old Farmer's Almanac, when the horns of the moon are pointing up, the moon is exerting an upward force, and when the horns are pointed down, it is exerting a downward force. Thus, the time to nail shingles onto a roof is during the down sign, a waning moon, so that the shingles will stay in place and not curl up. There you go. Did you know moon roofing was a thing? Apparently so. There we have it. All right, so everyone take a moment with your story. Once upon a time, right? What is your happily ever after in your Gemini house? If anyone needs more time, let me know. See if there's any comments here. And of course, none on Facebook. Phooey. I don't know why it wouldn't work on Facebook this time. It's very frustrating. Anyway, if anyone wants to share what they're setting intentions around tonight, I'll share mine. So this is kind of fun because I have Gemini rising. And I'm kind of, you know, at this point in my life where I've like this brand new opportunity forward, this brand new path I could take forward in any direction that I want to. And so I've been spending some time lately imagining, well, what does that look like for me? What does that mean? Where do I want to go? And I'm still not quite sure that I've answered all of it yet, but I think that's okay. I think when you don't have all the answers, you leave room for the universe to surprise you sometimes, right? And sometimes that's important. And so here's what I wrote. I wrote that it's my intention to use this solar eclipse in Gemini to step more fully into authenticity and living life on my own terms. I wrote, it's my intention to step more fully into who I am on a fundamental level and to allow this expression of me to come more fully into being. That it's my intention to live every day tapped into this authenticity so as to bring the truest expression of myself to all of my interactions and relationships, right? This is the kind of authenticity that I'm kind of going for here. I wrote that it's my intention to do this without compromising my integrity, without compromising my desires, dreams, and goals, so that I may make stronger and more authentic connections with others as I move more fully into the next iteration of my experience. And it's my intention to reach for my own highest personal potential in every way, as I create this life of curiosity and adventure and discovery and fun. And it's my intention to live happily ever after. And so I want to thank you for joining me. Feel free to share in the comments what it is you're setting your intentions around tonight. And two, if you're going to write an affirmation, share your affirmation. I love sharing affirmations with everyone. And I would encourage you, after you've done your intention setting, to draw out, like I said, what does your ideal outcome look like? What does your storybook ending look like? Draw a picture of it for yourself. Excuse me, just like it were a storybook, right? And then plan your next step, plan your first step, plan your reboot. And then you could be surprised where you find yourself 6 months from now. You really could be surprised. But take time to visualize your ideal outcome. That's really, really important. Spend time with the details. Like I said, the sights, the sounds, the smells, all of those things, the way that it would make you feel, the kind of gratitude and appreciation that you might be able to tap into in yourself by experiencing what it is that you want. If you missed the last broadcast of the Sidereal Insights Astro update. Catch that on the website or on the YouTube channel. I'm going to include a link in the video description when I hop off in case you did miss it. I talk about some of the upcoming transits that move out a little bit further than just tonight's eclipse, so you may want to watch that. But thanks everyone for joining me, and I want to invite you, if you got anything of value out of this practice, please tag a friend, share it with someone. You can subscribe to, of course, the channel, and click on the notification bell, and that way you'll get notified whenever I upload a new video. And thank you all for joining me for our new moon solar eclipse guided intention setting for Gemini. This has been so fun and so exciting, and I want to thank you for joining me. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.